Welcome everyone as our participants and join us. We just want to go over a couple of housekeeping information. We're really excited that you guys are here with us today and we're able to provide a space for you all. As we get started, we want to let everyone know that we do have Spanish interpretation available. If you go to the bottom of your Zoom, you'll be able to see a globe that says interpretation. Please go ahead and click on that globe and select the language in which you would like to hear, which in this case would be Spanish. I'm also going to let Patricia say that to us in Spanish as well.
Buenas tardes, muchas gracias por acompañarnos esta tarde. Mientras permitimos que algunos miembros de la mesa directiva se conecten y algunas otras personas, queremos darle las gracias por estar aquí el día de hoy, poder compartir su espacio y hacer sus preguntas. Les quiero recordar a todos que tenemos interpretación al español para aquellas personas que prefieran oír esta conversación en español. Todo lo que tienen que hacer es en la barra de abajo, escoger interpretación y escoger el lenguaje de su preferencia, en este caso el español. Gracias.
Thank you so much, Patricia, for that. We also want to let our community know that we do have ASL interpretation. So if you go to the participants area, there will be two ASL interpreters. One is Shelby and one is Terry, and there will be 3 dots on the top right-hand corner where you can go ahead and pin them so you could see them at all times. My name is Carla Rivera, and I am part of the Community Engagement Department here for AISD Communications and Community Engagement. So I'm super excited that I'm able to facilitate this conversation with all of our participants and our panelists that will be joining us tonight. This is a staff session, but we welcome our community if you want to stay with us. We would just want to let you know there will be a community session after this one. And so for all of our staff members that are here, we would love to know what campus you're coming from and give us your, if you put your staff name and school affiliation, we would really appreciate it. Now, this meeting is going to be a meeting where we're inviting the community to have the opportunity and space to find out information about what's happening in the district, as well as for you to be able to ask questions. We will have a panel discussion and we have some topics that we've kind of created ahead of time, but you're more than welcome to put your questions throughout in the chat or use the raise hand feature and we will call on you. So let's get started. I would love to introduce our incredible leadership team, and I'm going to start with our superintendent.
Thank you so much, Carla, and thank you to our interpreters, both our ASL and our Spanish interpreters as well. I'm going to work to keep my speed a little easier to manage. I tend to forget sometimes. So just give us a holler when some of us go a little too fast. So my name is Stephanie Elizalde, and I am truly honored to serve as your superintendent for Austin ISD. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Elizalde. Now we would leave it to our Chief Academics Officer.
Good afternoon, everyone. Elizabeth Casas, Chief Academic Officer. Welcome. It's great to see everyone.
Thank you so much. Our Equity Officer. Oh, my apologies. Our Chief of Schools.
It's okay. Good evening, everyone. Anthony Mays, Chief of Schools. Happy to be here, a part of the conversation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mays. Now for our Equity Officer.
Good afternoon. Glad to be here and excited about the conversation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Holly. Next up, we have our Chief Technology Officer.
Hello, everyone. Sean Brinkman, Chief Technology Officer. Thanks for spending some time with us this afternoon.
Our Chief of Police.
Good afternoon, everyone. Ashley Gonzalez, Chief of Austin ISD Police Department. Excited to be here with the rest of the team, listening in and answering some of your questions.
Thank you so much. Our Chief Human Capital Officer.
Leslie Stevens, good evening.
Thank you. And our Chief Officer of Intergovernmental Relations and Board Services.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jacob Reach, and I'm excited to be here with our Anderson and Navarro vertical team staff tonight.
Our Executive Director of Innovation and Development.
I think Ms. Wallace is with a trustee right now, but Ms. Wallace, our Executive Director of Innovation and Development, will be joining us in just a few minutes.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Dr. Reach. Our Chief Operations Officer.
Hello, everyone. My name is Matias Segura, and I am the Acting Chief of Operations, and I'm very excited to be here. Thank you for the time.
Thank you so much. And lastly, but not least, our Chief Communications and Community Engagement Officer.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jason Stanford, and I'm especially eager for this conversation today because of we've got people from the Enrichment School representing, and I actually work for Enrichment, so this means a lot to me.
Awesome. Thank you so much for all of our panelists for introducing yourselves. So we want to kick off this conversation with, I'm sure, whatever is going on in everyone's mind as we are at the end of our school year and we're preparing to pivot to the end of the school year and as well as summer. So Dr. Mays, can you tell us a little bit of what that's going to look like?
Sure, I'll do my absolute best to. So like you said, it's an exciting time for us because it is the end of the year. So we recognize that our students get to do all of those normal rites of passage. And so this year, of course, our celebrations will look a little different. We have our graduations taking place May 28th through June 3rd, and they'll be at outdoor stadiums because we want to make sure that we limit any possibilities of the spread of COVID-19. We'll have all of our protocols in place in terms of checking temperatures, masks, and social distancing. Students will only be able to bring the 4 guests as we celebrate this opportunity. We'll be porting in music. We won't have a live band, again, just to help us mitigate some of the areas of concern as we conduct this exercise. At this point, we've actually already been celebrating our proms, and those have been indoor-outdoor events where students are able to celebrate proms while social distancing and having a good time. And so we still have some of those in front of us. Food is packaged. We continue to maintain temperature checks and masking and all of that stuff to make sure that students get a chance to have as close as a normal end of year as possible. So that's where we are for the end of the year, and hopefully our students are enjoying themselves.
That's awesome. I'm so happy to be able to hear all those exciting things that are happening. And so as we're seeing kind of the end of this pandemic, I'm sure a lot of folks are starting to think about next year and what that is going to encompass. So Dr. Elizalde, can you tell us briefly about what our plans are?
Yes, thank you for that, Carla. Now, first of all, as everyone knows, depending on some things that could change, and they could change, but right now we are headed towards a much more, what I'll use right now, a traditional face-to-face instructional delivery for next school year. The Commissioner of Education about 6 weeks ago had indicated that we should all be planning for some type of virtual instruction. This was on a webinar with all of the over 1,000 superintendents in the state of Texas. And he was very confident and almost directing us to make sure that we were doing so. Well, since then, there has been a reversal from that statement. And so now it has become, well, and there are now 2 bills that are in the House that will give possibly the ability for public schools to offer virtual instruction. Right now, public ISDs are barred, not by our choice, so I want to make sure I'm clear. This is the Texas Education Agency has barred public ISDs from offering virtual instruction. So other than, y'all have probably heard about the Texas Virtual Network, and other than that network that has been approved, no other school districts. Now, charters are able to do so, but public schools are not. So, so with that, we had started some initial plans, but now it's looking like the state is really going to be wanting to keep us from being able to offer virtual. If we do offer virtual, it will be very limited, and it will probably need us to be in the form of like, since it would be virtual, then we would unenroll a student from a particular school and re-enroll them in a new school, a virtual school, that would have a different PEIMS number. But all of the rules and what they will and won't let us do, I know is not surprising to the Austin community, that the TEA has not given us any real direction about where that's going. So we'll continue to follow those bills to see how we can better prepare for that. Other than that, we are planning a very much more engaging traditional approach face-to-face to our next year's educational delivery. What I do want to make sure of are two things. We will continue to follow CDC guidelines. So if masks are required next school year, then masks will be required in Austin ISD. We will continue to follow the science with regard to safety and protocols and PPE for next year. That's also why many of us are continuing to work to see how many of our students that are 16 and above can get the vaccinations, because if we can do that now, we will also be in a better situation to utilize, and we are now beginning to utilize our schools as hubs. We have not been able to actually distribute the vaccines ourselves, but we've partnered with lots of other organizations that are helping us to give out vaccines at many of our schools. We're going to continue that partnership and continue that communication. That our hope would then be that when the 14 to 16 vaccine would become available, we would maybe already have hubs established in the summer, if that happens, to quickly give out vaccinations. The last thing I want to commit to is that regardless of what our challenges are going to be next year, we will not be having teachers do concurrent teaching. They will not be doing students virtual and students in the classroom. We obviously, what teachers already told us from the beginning, we should have believed them from the beginning, which was that was going to be an impossible delivery methodology. Of course, it was one of the few options that the TEA allowed us to utilize. So we'll continue though. I want to be very clear on that. We will not be continuing to ask our teachers to do concurrent teaching. So if we do have virtual, then we would have teachers that would be dedicated just to do virtual. And those that would be face-to-face will just be doing face-to-face. We do know that we've all learned from using technology, so we don't want to lose what we've learned about the technology. And now we've got a one-to-one distribution of technology, but we want to make sure that we continue to recognize we can never substitute a teacher. We must ensure that we're providing our teachers the support they need to have that face-to-face instruction. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Elizalde, especially providing that clarification for our staff that's here present. I know we have had some participants join us a little bit later, so I want to repeat to everybody that's joining us that we have ASL interpretation as well as Spanish interpretation, and we would love to hear from you. So if you do have questions, please feel free to put those in the chat, or use the raise hand feature on Zoom. While we're waiting for those questions to start coming up, we did have some participants submit some questions in their pre-registration. And one of the questions was, how does the district plan on supporting multiple curriculum offerings while maintaining equitable class size requirements?
We're going to switch ASL interpreters at this time.
Thank you. Do I need to repeat the question? I'm not sure if
yes,
no.
please.
So the question is, how does the district plan on supporting multiple curriculum offerings while maintaining equitable class size requirements?
So I'll start this one. So I'm assuming that they're talking about the change in our staffing guidelines this year. And I think there may be some application that is not translating over very well. So we currently are staffed for 80,000 students, because a year ago we were projected to have 80,000 students. The reality is we currently have approximately I think the last number I saw was 73,900 students enrolled. So that's a difference of 6,000 students. For next year, the projected enrollment is 77,351. So at next year's projected enrollment of 77,000, that's still under the 80,000 that we were projected a year ago that we're staffed at currently. So a lot of our staffing adjustments are based on the fact that we've lost students. Okay. So there's that bucket. Then we looked at the what you want to call staffing guidelines. And I'm going to use secondary as an example because I think that's where a lot of these are generated from. Austin ISD has utilized a staffing formula, for want of a better word, or a guideline of 29-to-1 for multiple years in the district. So they would take your projected enrollment, divide by 29, and that was the number of staff for your campus. If we would have just kept those staffing ratios the same, if we had just done 29 divided into your projected enrollment, we'd have lost approximately 600 and I believe it was 44 campus-based personnel. Instead, what we did, and we've heard a lot of things about equity in the district and how can we make things more equitable. So we looked at our staffing guidelines and looked at them through the lens of how can we look at our campuses, look at the needs of the campuses, and make some adjustments to those guidelines to more equitably put our resources where there's a higher need. So it's secondary, and like I said, I'm only using this as an example. It applies to others. We reduced the class number that we were using to 28-to-1. In addition to that is we took the projected enrollment for every campus and then weighted it for the number of economically disadvantaged students on a campus and multiplied that number by 1.2. So really, if a school was projected to have 800 students, depending on how many economically disadvantaged students were on their campus in October and in their enrollment in October, we actually used a higher number to run the calculation. And so in some campuses, it might have gone from 800 to 1,000. So we actually used 1,000 and then divided by the 28, which is less than previously. When we did that, we have a reduction on campuses of approximately 220 positions. And of those, we have not told any teachers that they don't have a job, because every year we hire between 500 and 600 teachers. So we have the positions. And so when somebody says, how does the district plan on supporting multiple curriculum offerings while maintaining equitable class size requirements? I think the misunderstanding is at the secondary level, there's not a class size requirement, meaning every one of your class periods is not going to have the same number of students, nor is there a limit to those number of students. We use 28 to determine the number of full-time equivalents that are given to a campus. But at a secondary campus, you're going to have PE classes that may have 50 students per period in them. And then you're going to have a CTE class that has 15 because that's the requirement of that welding class. So it's not that every classroom is going to have 28 every period. That is not at all. That just gives the number of FTEs. Students then do choice sheets. Campus principals look at choice sheets and tally things for courses, and they develop their master schedule. But it is not an equivalent for every class period. And there is a question about elementary. One of the changes we did at elementary is we took the grade level projections, we divided them into program. And by program, I mean, we did the ESL versus the dual language numbers, and then we divided by 22. And the ratio at elementary, and I say elementary, but I'm going to say in K through 4 specifically, it is 22-1. However, we did staff at 22.1 because remember that what we get in the spring are projections. So a lot happens from January when we get the projection and June, July, August when school starts. And so we did do that, and we're at 22.1 before we rounded up to the next classroom. And we will look at those in the fall, and we're looking at numbers as we come. Pre-K 4, we added teacher assistants to those classrooms so that on all of our campuses, our parents can pick up all their students at one time. So if I have a pre-K 4 student and I have a first grader, they now are all getting dismissed at the same time. And that is of a benefit to our students, for one, because now they get longer class day, but also for our parents for their convenience. So while the staffing guidelines, that's the big picture, the big thing comes down to student choices at secondary. And I hope I answered the question.
Yes, I think you did. And I don't want to stray away too far from some of the budget conversations, but there is a question about, is Head Start going to be an all day this coming year? So I'm not sure who can answer that question.
Yeah, and I know pre-K 4 is all day, but our pre-K 3 program is half a day. I'm just trying to figure out where Head Start falls in that. And Ms. Casas, do you?
I believe it is full day since it is off campus, but yes, pre-K 4 now with the addition of the teacher assistant will go full day, and the students will be dismissed at the same time as everybody else.
Awesome. Thank you for answering that question. And going back to budget, I know that, Ms. Stevens, you refer to like teachers not losing their jobs, but overall, as we do face some budgetary challenges, can you talk about, the staffing formula that you're looking at? Just because I'm sure a lot of our staff members who are not teachers might have those questions about their jobs.
So really, truly, for next year, what we use staffing guidelines for, we made some adjustments in certain positions such as counselor, assistant principal, classroom teacher, TAs, like we added a TA, in our pre-K 4 classrooms. But then we also have positions on campuses such as our custodial staff, our food service staff, our office staff, and we didn't mess with those formulas or guidelines to that degree.
Awesome. Is there any other budgetary information that you'd like to share? I think you shared a lot, but if anything in addition to.
I mean, the only thing I would say is our budget is, our staffing or our personnel are approximately 84 to 85% of our total overall budget. So, keep in mind that, when we have a budget, the bulk of our budget is in our human capital for the district. So we do consider that one of our greatest resources.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much. And so as we're, waiting for our participants to ask more questions, I did have a question from one of our pre-registrations, which was, when are grant funded allocations distributed to campuses and departments?
So I can answer that. So when the campus is awarded a grant, or not a campus, when someone is awarded a grant, there is a paper that they fill out that is called an explanation of expenditures, and that goes into the grants office. And what it does is, if it says you have a grant for $500,000, the explanation of expenditures tells the grants office exactly where you want the money. So that goes in at the same time as a form called a GSA, and it's a grant staffing document. So if you're going to pay for a position out of a grant, those two go in hand to the grants department. Once the grants department reviews it and compares it to the grant application, then it goes over to budget to set up the budget for that grant. And then it comes to human capital to where we can create that position with that budget code. So it all depends on when we're notified of that grant and that documentation gets submitted through the grants office.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for answering that. We do have questions about COVID precautions, and as well as, are vaccines going to be required for our staff and all throughout our district? Can anyone answer that question? Kind of relating back to what our COVID precautions are going to look like and if vaccines are required.
So I'm happy to help answer that question, and then may ask Ms. Stevens to assist with the answer. So overall, right now, the governor actually has an executive order that has stated that governmental entities, which include school districts, cannot require a vaccine as a term of employment. So for this moment, the district would not be able to require a vaccine of either staff or students. Of course, if that changes, we would want to discuss under what terms that would look like. For students, because that's a little bit different, and as many know, we do have some vaccines that are required for students to be enrolled unless they get a qualified exemption from that. But as of right now, the governor has stated also that he will not require the vaccine for students for two reasons. One, because the vaccine is not available to all age students. Right now, only available to ages 16 and up. And we're hoping it'll be available to 12 and up quickly. But two, it is still under an emergency order. And so the governor has made clear that he would not consider it until it has full approval and is no longer under just an emergency approval.
Thank you so much, Dr. Reach. Before we move on, there was a question that came up in the chat. It says, is the district going to offer any summer programs to address learning gaps academically and socially as a result of the impact of COVID on student learning, and also addressing STAR or credit recovery? Do I need to repeat the question?
Repeat that one more time for me.
So is the district going to offer any summer programs to address learning gaps academically and socially as a result of the impact of COVID on student learning, other than those that are addressing STAR or credit recovery?
Yes, and so I can start out, and then Ms. Costas can probably join. So we've really tried to work to focus on meeting student social and emotional needs. And so I know that for us, beyond those transition grades where students are moving from 5th grade to 6th grade or 8th grade to 9th grade or seniors, we will be covering, you know, some of those pieces that need to be addressed to help those students that may have struggled during this time. But outside of that, we have several camps that while they do have an academic focus, they're designed to make sure that they're filled with fun so that our students enjoy the experiences that they may have during those camps that we set up at our middle schools and at our high schools. So there's opportunities for enrichment outside of just that purely focused academic piece. It should be at I would venture to say at all of our campuses, some opportunities at all of our campuses. So I know Ms. Costas and the academic team helped create those opportunities, so she may be able to share some more information about those.
Well, just that we're working with Dr. Gloria Williams and her team. The academics teams are working to create some enrichment opportunities to have some different types of camps, like a theater camp, a science camp, so that they're theme-based and kids can learn while still building their skills. So we are working hard with the school leadership team to make sure we have some great opportunities for students.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Mays and Ms. Casas. So it sounds like we're making some changes, obviously, to really support our students where it's needed. And we would like to know a little bit about how, Dr. Elizalde, how have you worked with staff and community to kind of identify those areas of need?
Thanks for that question. Very briefly, I think there were a lot of individuals that I either met with individually or in groups when I was first joining our district, which seems like so long ago, and yet it also seems like yesterday. I don't know how it can be like both at the same time, but that's certainly how it feels for me today anyway. And there were some common themes that, you know, I was listening for, and some of those common themes that I think you can actually will probably lead to maybe something Dr. Hawley can talk about is equity was a common theme through just about any group of individuals, where they were civic leaders, whether they were parents, whether they were members of the leadership team, of the Chamber of Commerce, whether it was any group, equity was absolutely a common theme. Of course, there were also common themes amongst many of the groups regarding concerns around special education, around the implementation of dual language. So those were some additional areas that came up multiple times. And the way we've ultimately already begun to respond to that is to create certain advisory committees, one of which Dr. Hawley has created along with some subcommittees to begin to address some concerns, and also to be in line with, of course, our district's mission, vision, values, and priority focus areas.
Carla, you're on mute.
My apologies. So before we move on to the next section, I want to address this question that was in the chat. The question is there any indication of how or when the federal money released by Governor Abbott, which was yesterday, will filter through TEA, AISD, and then down to the campuses?
Well, isn't that the million-dollar question? Because at least now we know we are getting some monies. That's the good news. Some of the not so good news is in the hesitancy to even give us the answer to whether we were getting funds or not has impacted, honestly, it's impacted staff, because it didn't allow you all to do a lot of planning. If we have this money, well, what do you do with the money? Well, you have to plan, and we haven't had those opportunities because we didn't know what amount we were getting. We didn't know if we were getting it, and if we got it, what are the strings that are attached? Because in many instances, I know as staff members, you all know this as well as I, there's always, you can spend, but, and then they give us all these requirements or parameters. You must use certain programs. You must pick from this vendor list. You must, and you must. So Dr. Reach probably has, or Mr. Gogonas may have a better sense of when the dollars might be met. I think you saw our Chief Communications Officer put in there where they're estimating we would be getting 155 million. We need it, of course we do. There are lots of things that need to be reimbursed, starting with all of the expenses that were never reimbursed for COVID safety protocols as a beginning. But the other area has to be a focus on, one of the questions I heard earlier from you, Carla, and from what I saw in the chat as well, about how are we going to work towards the academic losses that have occurred and provide the mental health support that our students are going to need. So I don't know if Mr. Gogonas or Dr. Reach have any thoughts about like how long will it take for us to get these funds actually into our hands, if you will.
Well, good evening. This is George Gogonas, Executive Director of Finance, and serving as the interim CFO at the moment. We've been able to identify that 100 million will be available shortly. We have to go through the application process, but they've told us to go ahead and start planning how you're going to spend it, and so that's going to be the first goal, is to identify and do the engagement and identify the areas that will be our priority focus. But with anything, kind of the application process can be a little tedious, but we are, ready to receive them and start spending and reimbursing ourselves as soon as possible.
Thank you so much for that information. So now let's move on to our next section and let's talk a little bit about equity. And I'm gonna lead this with Dr. Holly, if you could talk a little bit about our Equity Advisory Committee.
So good evening, everyone. And it's exciting to see so many people on today and engaged in the conversation. Just to pick up where Dr. Elizalde was, we have put together a committee to help really begin to rebuild some bridges and strengthen some bridges with our community. And the idea behind this advisory committee is that it will provide recommendations directly to Dr. Elizalde. And as you can see on the right-hand side, we have a number of subcommittees that will have some focus areas that are aligned with the board's priorities. One of the unique things we've done and what makes this, this particular advisory committee a little different is that we have 4 co-chairs. We have 2 community members, we have 2 district employees as well, and we have students and staff, and we welcome everybody to become engaged and to help us focus on those areas we know we need to build upon, and then also to help us really address those issues that we know have been prevalent for decades, probably for some of us. But the hope is that we can engage the community and the district, everybody together, solving problems and supporting student success. And I would shift to Dr. Elizalde. Dr. Elizalde, is there anything you'd like to add to the power of this group that's coming together? We've had our second meeting, but just wanted to pass it to you to share your thoughts.
Well, I just want to emphasize something that you often don't give yourself credit for, and that is at the very top of this, what I now call Dr. Holly's flower petal blooming, is the community building and education. All of this has to be rooted with our community and stakeholder engagement. And so you'll see that there at the top, and it's really important. And that's a very, you know, that's a very broad range of individuals, but it's really important because this has to be something we do with our community, not to our community. And so I just want to emphasize that, Dr. Holly, and thank you for your leadership.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Holly and Dr. Elizalde, for that equity lens. And now I want to open it up to our new Chief of Communications and Community Engagement to talk a little bit about communication priorities.
Yes, thank you, Carla. So this is coming up on the end of my 4th week on the job. And what I've learned is there are a lot of really talented people here who believe in the mission. And so it's made it very easy to turn things and move them full speed ahead in a short amount of time. I think if you go to the announcements part of Austin ISD's webpage, in fact, on the first page, you're not going to see press releases and typical government announcements anymore. We're starting to take the communications department and community engagement department and turn it into a news organization so that we can report how we interact with the community and what we're doing. And it turns out a lot of people in this department have news backgrounds. And so we're having a lot of fun covering a lot of really great stories. Last night, we were one of the first people to put up a news story about Greg Abbott releasing all the federal COVID relief funds for schools. So we're able to do some good stuff there because what I found is that with local journalism dying around the country, there's truly a jobs crisis in journalism, that it's up to organizations to tell their own story. And I don't think anyone has a better story than Austin ISD. And it's been tremendously rewarding. You're gonna see some bigger things from us. We've got the website and the social media, and we're going to start merging that with the television station that we have so that we can weaponize our reporting. And we really want to turn a lens on, not just on us and tell our story, but we want to tell how we interact with the community and with teachers and kids. And we want to tell that bigger story about how we fit in. And one reason we're doing that is because we realize as a district, a lot of trust has been eroded over the years. And there has been a lot of fear about admitting that there are problems. And if there's one thing I'm encouraged about, And in private conversations and leadership over here and on my team, there is no one who's afraid of admitting there are problems because everyone's eager to fix them. And that's a story we're dying to tell here.
Thank you so much, Jason. And so I want to kick off with the board had recently adopted a strategic framework before the change in leadership this past summer. And so we kind of want to know what's the next step in those processes. And so we asked if Michelle Wallace is joined us. She could talk about that.
Hi, everybody. Great to be here tonight. Michelle Wallace, Executive Director of the Office of Innovation and Development. And yeah, that's right. So the strategic plan framework was approved last year by the Board of Trustees. It includes our mission, vision, values, priority focus areas, and the board was very intentional about setting equity as the foundation for those focus areas. They had a conversation about, is equity a separate area? And they really felt like it was important to embed equity throughout the strategic plan focus areas. Those areas are student well-being and achievement, teacher and employee well-being, culture of respect and customer service, and fiscal stewardship and prioritization. And right now, Dr. Elizalde and her leadership team were working hard to develop strategies and action steps that will make progress against those areas and the scorecard that the Board of Trustees also approved, which is how we'll measure our progress. We are very fortunate to work closely with Dr. Stephanie Hawley and her team, who have done, as she talked about, a tremendous amount of community engagement over the last year and a half. And really looking closely at that work, the equity action plan, the themes and recommendations that have come out of that, and making sure that equity stays at the center as we move forward with the process. That's an update.
Thank you so much, Ms. Wallace. And so Dr. Elizalde, now that we've adopted this framework, can you explain the next steps for us?
Sure. This is really intended to be a cyclical assessment of our own work. And so we utilize the strategic framework to develop a scorecard. And then from the scorecard, which should absolutely not be everything that's important, by the way. There are a lot of things we need to monitor and improve on. But ultimately, you have to pick a few things that you're actually going to evaluate on your district scorecard. And from that scorecard, you create a district improvement plan or a strategic plan, which is where you're going to include all of the inputs and the outputs that are necessary in order for us to reach our goals of truly having equitable academic outcomes for all students, regardless of what zip code or what kind of learning styles they may have. This is about our system being responsive to our students, not the other way around. It's not about students having to fit into the mold. And so this is a reflection of our work and our service. And it allows us to then, in a cyclical manner, ask ourselves, are we getting closer to those goals? If we are, we continue what we're doing. If we're not, what kinds of adjustments do we need to make?
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Elizalde. And so there was a question in the chat, but I want to remind all of our participants that if you do have a question, again, please go ahead and add that to the chat, or please use the raise hand feature so that we can call on you. So our next
We'll be switching ASL interpreters at this point.
Thank you for that. So for our next question, it goes as follows. Where are we on these special education evaluations? I hear that we have a new executive director of special education. Will they be able to provide the necessary staff, and funding needed to do a quality job for our students that receive these services? And please let me know if I need to repeat that question.
No, I got it. Yes. So we do have a new executive director that we announced this week that starts on May 17th. And yes, the department does have enough staffing and enough positions. Also this week, we announced to the special ed department that we're doing a big reorganization of the central staff so that we can get the leaders in place and create a structure that's going to be more conducive to supporting campuses. So we have a generous budget and a generous amount of staff. We're just reorganizing people to be in the right place to support the services and the campuses so that we can have high quality special education services.
And so let me add to that, because again, there are a lot of positions that are currently assigned to a central org. It's kind of like having folks on a bus, but the question is, are each of us on the right seat on the bus? And so initially when I arrived and I heard the concerns with special ed, I too was under the impression that we didn't have enough people or that there weren't enough dollars going there. I do want to be very clear about what we have to own and what we have to improve on. There are sufficient staff. I was shocked at the number of staff. It's that we haven't organized together as a team to make sure that we're actually recognizing that we need to provide those services to campuses. That's not an individual person. It's not about who we're blaming. It's that we're going to take responsibility and we're going to say, now we understand where our challenges are. And so I also saw a question about like the evaluations. And so there is now a timeline and there are dedicated individuals. Every one of the individuals whose evaluations are due at this time have all received phone calls. We're working with staff and to create flexibility for parents, right? Like maybe it needs to be in an evening for parents when they can be part of the evaluation. So Ms. Casas has led the team of doing things weekends. Maybe the parent, it's easier for them on a Saturday. So we're doing flexibility. Yes, it can also be during the school day, but it can also be in an evening. It can also be on a Saturday. We want to say we're student-centered and that we're family-friendly. Then we have to be flexible and think differently than just from 8 to 4 is when we're going to do our evaluations. In addition to that, I know at one of our board meetings, there was a question with regard to the number of contractors that we were needing to utilize in order to meet the needs of all of these evaluations. So I do want to share that while the board approved that, we haven't come close to using the dollar amount, not that I can remember right now off the top of my head, but we're not close to using that dollar amount. And in fact, what we do recognize is the more we can move away from contracted services and have actual employees that work with us, we build a better family structure so that we can provide that support. So we're going to be also looking to move away from the contracted services and ensuring that we have the sufficient staff to meet the needs of all of our students. So the truth is, no, it isn't solved yet. We do have a good roadmap that will get us there, and we are committed to completing all of the evaluations by June 30th, because you at our campus level have to know for this next school year, what are all the services that we need to provide for students, and we need to allocate the staff so that they're on campus to provide the services to students. So you're gonna see over the next 4 to 8 weeks, a quick ramp up of evaluations that are being completed, along with, and a completed completed evaluation means we also have held the ARD with our parent, including, so they can be a part of that process. It's not done until we have included the parent in that entire process. So maybe a little bit more than you needed, but I know it's a hot topic and I understand why, and it should be, and we're going to continue to work on improving that. There is a very solid plan.
Thank you so much, Dr. Elizalde, and I don't think that was too much information. I think it was very much needed. I'm sure a lot of our staff members had questions about that. So thank you so much. So I want to kind of open it up to some of our panelists who haven't been able to talk. So I want to bring up Mr. Brinkman to talk a little bit about Wi-Fi and tech access.
Yeah, so sure. We're taking kind of a three-pronged approach with this, and there's a lot coming down through the federal and state on making sure that all of our students have high-speed internet access. We utilized the hotspot approach because that's what we had. And in some situations it worked, in some situations it didn't work real well. Recently, the federal government has allowed school districts to actually extend their Wi-Fi network into the community. So we'll be looking at opportunities to build that out. And ultimately, hopefully providing all of our students and family members Wi-Fi, campus Wi-Fi into the home. So we're looking at that, and this next year coming up, we've done a really good job, I think, with putting computers in kids' hands and making sure the instructional systems are available. We're really going to focus on our business side moving forward. So we're going to be launching a new ERP coming up. We should realize a ton of efficiencies in the district, from hiring on teachers to some of our payroll processes, some of our purchasing processes now. So that project will get kicked off next year as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mr. Brinkman. And now I want to open it up to our Chief of Police, Chief Gonzalez. If you could talk a little bit about mental health response and, racial bias training.
Absolutely. So thank you so much, Carla. So our focus continues to be training, and this has been a tough year for our students staying home and look to come back. And we realize that's going to have an impact on students. And so we've been kind of revamping our training a little bit. Also, with the recent events going through the nation, we realized that some of the students might be concerned about the interactions with police. So our focus now has shifted to a lot of de-escalation training, mental health training. All our officers are trained as mental health officers, and we realize by the nature of our job, we are sometimes the first ones to arrive on the scene where a student might be in crisis. So we looked at that as, trying to help the student de-escalate the situation, stabilize it until we can get other resources on scene, like counselors, and then turn it over to the administration. So not looking at this as a law enforcement function or a violation or a crime, but really as a resource to the student and their families. We also trained the entire department, including our dispatchers, on racial intelligence and in training and engagement. So we can look at the, from that perspective, focusing on customer service, treating everyone that we come in contact with respect and dignity.
Thank you so much, Chief Gonzalez. Really appreciate all that information. And last but not least, I want to bring up our Chief Operations Officer, Matias Segura, to talk a little bit about facilities.
Thank you, Carla. Hello, everybody. Certainly excited to share with everybody on the call, on the Zoom call, all the great work that's been ongoing. Certainly the pandemic has been a challenge, but we've been able to get through it and have continued to build modernized facilities. Many of them you see here on the graphic, including Ann Richards or Menchaca Elementary School, the Norman Sims Elementary School, or Doss Elementary School. Certainly a lot of really exciting projects, and these are truly, reinventing how students embrace the space that they learn in. So we're very excited about that. We're also ensuring that, all of our students and staff remain warm, safe, and dry. So double checking and performing assessments in all of our HVAC systems, just wanting to do whatever we possibly can to make our facilities as warm, safe, and secure as possible as we invite more and more students back every single day. The work will continue. Everything that we do is certainly in an effort to ensure that our commitment to the voter stays true, and we've been successful thus far. So again, a lot of exciting things occurring, many of those in these vertical teams here. So certainly a lot of really great spaces that we can share with our students. Thank you, Carla.
Thank you so much, Mr. Segura, for that. Appreciate it a lot. I want to open it up to one more final question before we end this meeting. So if you'd like to put it on the chat, please go ahead and do so, or you can use the raise hand feature to ask a question. Don't see any hand raised or any questions in the chat. But if you do have any questions, as a reminder, as Gabriela has mentioned, the session is being recorded, and we will be sharing all of our sessions, including this one, at a later date on our website. If you do have questions that come up after, please reach out to Gabriela Becker at gabriela.becker@austinaisd.org for more information. But really, we want to say, firstly, thank you to all of our interpreters, both Spanish and ASL, for your time in interpreting this session for this evening. We really appreciate all of our panelists for providing information that I know many of our staff members were probably wondering and wanting to know. And we just also want to thank all of you for taking your time of this evening to join us. And we look forward to many more conversations like this in the future. If you'd like to join us, I'm sorry.
And Carla, thank you for hosting us and for getting us through another session. We appreciate you as well.
Thank you.
And Gabriela is your partner in crime.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it, and we love doing this to have this space and opportunity with all of you. If you want to join us for our community session, we will be having that after this meeting. So I'll see you guys there. Bye-bye.